The extent of Hurricane Irma's impact here in Brevard County was days without power, debris on our properties, and minor damage to our houses. It is important to sometimes put our hurricane misfortunes into perspective. In August of 1992, Principal Fleming lost his house, was injured, and put into near-death scenarios by a Category 5 storm they called Hurricane Andrew.
Andrew and Hurricane Andrew was something that changed the whole face of natural disasters, catastrophes, insurance, and how that's calculated, and how people do mass evacuations and building codes. It changed everything.
Principal Fleming describes what it was like to be inside Hurricane Andrew.
We said, well, we're going to go to Homestead, where my brother's house was. Now, Homestead happened to be the direct ground zero of the eye wall of Hurricane Andrew. My house was on the northern end of it. So I had family members that had 6 different family members. We each had our own house within 8 miles of each other. All of our homes were destroyed. So there's nothing, we couldn't help each other. So I'm just going to paint a picture for you that at 4:40 a.m., all of a sudden the power goes out. All of our windows had 1/2-inch plywood on the windows, thinking, no, nothing's going to come through that. I was standing, there was a window here, a window there, and I was standing in front of a window listening to what were rocks being blown from the field across the street of my brother's house and hitting the wood. I could hear it, and I was like, wow, that's blowing rocks into the house. My brother was standing in front of the other glass window, and there was a glass window in between us. About 30 seconds into hearing howling and roof starting to blow off, a piece of Mexican barrel tile, you've probably seen it before on top of houses, orange in color, blew from a house a 1/2 mile away, through the air, went through the wood, through the window, and stuck in the wall behind me as I was standing in front of the window. If I had been standing 2 feet to my right, we would not be having this conversation right now. So immediately after that happening, the windows started to explode in the house, every window, even though they were covered, because of the barometric pressure, and now that the wind started to get in the house, then the roof started blowing off. So I turned and I ran down the hallway, which was behind me. The wall was here where the tile hit. And as I'm running down the hallway to the back bedroom where my wife and my 1-year-old daughter, she's 25 now, 1-year-old daughter was at the time, a piece of glass about 4 inches hit me in the back. Didn't know it was stuck in my back because my adrenaline. So I grabbed the mattress, I grabbed my wife, daughter, got into the closet, pulled the mattress over top of us. When I leaned back against the wall, guess what was sticking in my back? A 4-inch piece of glass. So my wife had to reach around my back and pull the glass out of my back. I still have the scar. And then we sat in what was left of that closet with the house caving in and the roof blowing off for about 2 hours. Then, thinking the storm was over, it was still dark out a little bit, it was just starting to get light, I went out, dug through some furniture, was barefooted, so cuts all over the bottom of my feet because of the glass everywhere, peeked outside, and it was clear sky. But I looked to my east, and it was purple. So we were in the eye of Hurricane Andrew.
Principal Fleming goes on to explain some of the bizarre sights he saw during the hurricane.
They were facing east. A washing machine from that same house, about a 1/2 mile across the field, had tumbled, because it was an outdoor washing machine, I guess, had tumbled, hit the front of my truck, went on the hood, smashed the windshield, and landed in the back of my truck. So I came out, and I had a washing machine in the back of my pickup truck that was not there the night before. And we wondered how something like that could happen. That was just one of the anomalies that you couldn't explain. Another one was a McDonald's drinking straw. Okay, they're about that long, and they're plastic. I had a tree stump over what was left of my front tree after I got back to what was left of my house, and it was sticking 4 inches out of a tree stump. So, which means about 3 inches of it were in the tree stump. Now, how does something like that happen?
Principal Fleming describes the moment he came back to what remained of his house.
Eventually, after about 2 hours, I made my way going through yards and fields and other people's neighborhoods and what was driving over fences and different things to what I thought was my neighborhood. But there were no landmarks. There were no street signs. There were no... So I finally get to what's left of my house, and it's just completely destroyed. The entire roof's blown off. Every window was blown out. No trees. I mean, no landmark. Nothing. I mean, it was just completely destroyed. And I went inside my house. I opened the door. The front door was still intact, but of course none of the roof was. And there was a street sign. And there was a street sign from 6 blocks away that was in my living room. I lived at Southwest 110th Street and 89th Avenue, and that was from 82nd Avenue.
Next, Principal Fleming describes an encounter he had while evacuating after the storm hit.
I got to a rest area in Pompano Beach. And when I got to the rest area, a police officer who had no earthly idea of the devastation about 45 miles south, proceeds to tell me that I cannot drive my truck without windows. So I looked him in the eye and I said, "Officer, I respect the law. I have been raised that way. But you're going to have to shoot me, okay? Because I'm getting in my truck and I'm getting my family out of here. You can shoot me, but that's the only way you're going to stop me." Obviously, he didn't want any part of that, so he decided to let me go. We got to a motel. We stayed in that motel for about the next 2 weeks. Of course, figuring out what we're going to do. We were just happy to have power. I then went to Ocala for another 2 weeks and stayed at a friend of mine's cabin and bought a mobile home. Drove the mobile home back to what was left of my house, which took me, again, a 10-hour drive from Ocala, which is normally only a 5-hour drive. And lived in what was left of my house, in a camper in what was left of my house for the next 3 months. Still with no power. I had a generator for power. So we had no power for about 3 months after the storm.
During Hurricane Irma, some of us lost power for a few minutes. Some of us lost power for a few days. But I really hope that none of us had it as bad as Principal Fleming had it during Hurricane Andrew.
It took us 2 years to rebuild our house. Once we rebuilt our house, I had some research I had done prior to the hurricane that we were thinking about relocating anyway, and that was our opportunity to move out of that area. But we had to wait till property values came back so we could sell our home and move up this way. And that was 25 years ago. And so whenever a hurricane is approaching, I tell anybody, and I have pictures, and but there are no pictures that do justice to standing in what was left after that hurricane.
This has been Dylan O'Brien reporting for WCTZ. Thank you for tuning in, Wildcats.